Well, it's great to talk to you today about Nurses Season 2. Congratulations.
Mhm. Thank you.
First off, jumping back into a series in the middle of the pandemic, what was it like filming at that point?
It was a learning experience. We started the beginning of season 2 before the pandemic, got shut down, sent home for 4 months, and then we came back to complete the season. And it was overwhelming because everything was still so new and so scary, and we didn't know what the protocols were going to be like. Everything was new, and so it took a lot of getting used to. But we did an amazing job. We didn't have a single case, a single shutdown. Like, everything went super well, and we all felt really safe. But yeah, it was definitely a weird experience that I never thought would happen in my lifetime. Like, that idea never crossed my mind.
And it's weird too, because it's a medical show. So having a show in the middle about medical issues in the middle of a pandemic, I'm sure must be doubly kind of strange.
It definitely was, and it added a layer of, weight to what we were doing and the stories that we were telling to really, honor the frontline workers that had, for the months before that, taken care of us and done everything they could to keep us safe.
So where's Grace at in season 2? I've already seen the first episode, but I'm curious to hear from you kind of where she goes this season.
Yeah, I think, Grace comes in and she comes in season 1 and she's looking for that fresh start. She's looking to, kind of move past some things that happened at another hospital. And then that follows her to this new hospital, and she's forced to confront it. And you see her go through all of that in season 1 and confront it, and, people support her and believe her, and she kind of gets, the justice that she deserves. And, so she comes back in season 2 with that fresh start, like a real fresh start that she was hoping for at the beginning of season 1. And she's got this, strength and this support from these people that, helped her go through this really tough thing and, didn't waver and were on her side the whole time. So you get to see her kind of step into her power and her strength a bit and get to be, who she is and not burdened by the past.
And I love the way that season 1 dealt with the whole storyline in kind of one great arc, I guess you could say. Like, everything from start to finish in season 1 works out so well. So it's great to see that season 2 then almost is like a next chapter for her.
Exactly. Yeah.
So she kind of has to deal with a new relationship though in the new administrator who's coming in.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about how she kind of deals with Kate? Because obviously things start, maybe, I don't want to say the wrong foot, but there's certainly some sparks there.
Well, Kate's coming in to kind of revamp the hospital and make the changes that it needs to make it, a better hospital for patients. And so she's tough. She's like very tough, but she also knows kind of the scandal and the things that happened in the previous season and kind of around Grace. And so I think, Grace is kind of coming in a little bit like trepidatious, being like, well, does she know? Does she judge me? What is her thoughts on everything that happened and that I went through? But Grace has really like owned her power, and she's not going to let anybody stand in her way now. So it's, two very powerful women kind of coming up against each other. But I think, Kate, she wants what's best for the hospital and for everybody, and knows that Grace is a good nurse. And that's all it kind of comes down to. And so I think, we do see them find a little bit of like happy ground, but it's definitely a little bit of a rough go for the two of them.
What's the arc for Grace and the team across the second season? Is there something that kind of, I guess, paints an overall picture of the stories this season?
I think what's really cool about this season is that everybody, all 5 of us, kind of have our own arc this season. We all have our own thing that's going on, our own struggle, our own growing and learning process. But more than season 1, you really see the bond between the five of them and how they kind of get through everything they're going through with the help and support of each other. So it's a really fun season that way, because you really get to see individually how everybody is kind of dealing with their own thing.
Do you have a favorite part about working in this show? There are some faux, for you guys as actors, faux, gory bits or things like that. Is that interesting? What's the best part?
I would definitely say the best part of working on the show was working with, all the cast and everybody. We all became really close friends, and I'm from Vancouver, and so I got to go to Toronto and film, which was another amazing aspect, because it's fun to be somewhere else. The cast and the crew and all of our writers and directors were so much fun, and we all had such a blast together. But something that is so otherworldly to me being an actor is the fakeness and the hospital aspect of it. Even though it's all fake, it's still really interesting to be like, oh, that's how that would happen, or oh, that's how you would do that, or these things that I would never get an insight into any other way.
The other side of that is getting around the lingo. Is it ever difficult to learn that lingo? I imagine there must be some learning curve.
Oh yeah. There's I'm one of those people where I really have to know what I'm talking about in order to be able to memorize it. So I'm Googling and researching all of these medical terms, but there are just some words that just are so long that can't stick in my brain. And I'm like, how do doctors just know all of these things? How do they just go to school and then memorize all of this and never forget it and know what it means and how to, it is incredible to me. It is just they're magicians.
Have you ever had a chance to talk to doctors during the making of the show? Have you had a chance to meet doctors or nurses?
Yeah, we have an on-set medical consultant with us at all times, because even scenes where there's nothing there's no heavy medical stuff going on, there's always, how you take gloves on and off, how you would move that piece of equipment, how you would make that bed, things that you're like, oh, that's a no-brainer. There is a protocol and an exact way to do all of those things. So we had somebody, his name is Josh, he was amazing, there to make us, look like we knew what we were doing and doing everything properly. I have a couple of friends who work in the medical field, so I was able to, go to them as well and get some information and have some conversations with them about, all things medical.
Do you have any interesting, co-stars coming in, or I should say cameos or guest stars coming in this season?
Oh yeah, all of our guest stars this season were so great. Because of the pandemic, all of our guest stars were from Canada,
right?
Which was really, really cool and such an amazing thing, because all of us were Canadian, and so being able to work with some other incredible Canadian actors was just such a treat. But yeah, we have some really great guest stars, some amazing actors, and some really fun patient nurse storylines this season. Some wild patients that you're like, I didn't even know that could happen. So it's interesting. There's some very cool stories.
I saw something about a shopping cart, and I'm very curious how that episode is going to go.
Oh yeah, there are some things that you're like, oh, that doesn't seem so far out of happening, but you're like, oh, they would come to the ER. You're like, wow, I would never. And it just gives you an insight into some of the crazy, wacky things that do come into the ER and nurses have to figure out how to deal with.
I can't imagine. I'm sure it's ridiculous sometimes, for good and for bad. But
yeah.
The last thing I want to ask you is, I saw, I love talking about travel too. I saw you say in one of your bio things that you have a routine you do before you fly.
I do.
Is that something you can talk about? I'd love to hear about it.
It's this little, I can't tell you what it is.
Okay, that's fair.
It's this little superstition thing. My uncle, who actually lives in Toronto, I used to be really, really terrified of flying. I was a very stressed out, anxious flyer. And my uncle has traveled everywhere in the world. He's traveled so much. He's flown more than anybody I know. And he would do this before every single flight. And he was like, I've never had a bad experience on a plane. Like, and I've flown countless times. He's like, if you do this before you fly, you'll be fine too. Like, if you do this thing, you'll be totally fine. And ever since I started doing it, the anxiety has gone away. I've like started to trust. So it's my own little, like our own little superstition thing. And then my sister, who's younger than I am, was also anxious flyer, and I passed it on to her. And now it's this thing that we do. But yeah, just a little thing we have to do right before we fly.
That's wonderful though, because I mean, I've read how you say how much you love traveling. So it's wonderful to hear that, there are mechanisms and things that you can do to kind of defeat the fear, I guess.
Yeah, just like a little comfort thing, just a little reminder.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the time. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and all the best.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.